Okay, guys, welcome to the Prophetic Outlook. This is just a quick update this evening. And what we're going to be talking about, or what I'm going to talk about briefly, and I'm going to show you some stuff, some footage here, is about the rising of the beast system, specifically the developments that have happened over the last 3 weeks. Now, we have seen this and we can trace this back to the likes of the Trump tour of the Middle East, but also the geopolitical shifting that has happened specifically for me in Europe. Some people disagree, but I believe that reconstituted Rome, aka the European Union, will be the place in which the Antichrist will come on the scene. Certainly, the place as the framework for the beast system. But this will be a worldwide global system. This will be a system that we know is associated with 10 kingdoms, not necessarily 10 kings, nor necessarily 10 political rulers. It could be a technocratic system. But we're seeing it, in my opinion. We're seeing the rise of this, the development of this. We're seeing all things come into play. And I want to kind of talk about something I've mentioned already in previous lives and previous streams about Britain's connection with the EDU and how this has went against the democratic process, how this has went against certainly the will of other nations and the will of British citizens, but what this means prophetically. And I think by looking at this, we can see the growth of a beast system and not just the growth of it, but the structuring of it happening. Now, we can talk about that in terms of biometrics, digital IDs, central bank digital currencies, different things happening in the Middle East, certainly the geopolitical shifting that is happening between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which one is the flavor of the day. But I'm talking about it specifically right now in terms of Europe. So, without further ado, guys, make sure that you like, make sure you share, make sure you comment, make sure you say where you're coming in from. This is a bank holiday here, and I don't normally take time off in any way, shape, or form, but I'm trying to set aside time to do other things and things with the family and so on. So, um, I want to look at a couple of videos. Let's just look at this. If it shows, here we go.
She was asked about UK access to defence funds, which is what the UK government had been saying it was all about.
Well, which is why we were going, because it was something like 150 million something.
That's a billion, yeah.
Billion.
And it was all laid out. The UK would be going into a much deeper deal, much more significant one, with a lot of legal commitments. And one of them was a big contribution, financial contribution, alignment with EU rules, and opening UK defence contracts to EU firms. And this was all a surprise. And this is what tells us that actually this stitch-up that they were aiming to do at the very beginning.
Okay, so if you're not aware of what's being talked about here, Keir Starmer has went across to Europe, met with Ursula von der Leyen, and they have came to an arrangement. They've came to an agreement that centres around the British Army and specifically the defence and foreign policy of the UK. Now, if you look at some of the other stuff that I'm going to show you here, this will show both the distancing by the EU from Washington, something that they've been very clear to say and speak about. Ursula von der Leyen has said that it is the disengagement from Washington and that the EU has to stand alone as its own entity. And our title today is "The Beast Has Teeth." One of the things that they're talking about is they have to stand with a standing army and a nuclear capability. So this is a massive leap forward, guys. This is a massive leap forward to what we know is prophesied about in Revelation 13 in the arrival of the beast system. This beast system has to have teeth. In Revelation 13, I think this is verse 2, says, "Now the beast which I saw, it was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his powers, his throne, and great authority." Now, before people get confused, this is not talking about some hybrid. Each one of those are representations of the nations of past, the empires. This goes all the way back to Daniel 2, and actually Daniel 7 and Daniel 11, in terms of the prophecy of the successive empires, first seen through the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, but then later on we see the, workings out of this in Daniel 11. And what this is talking about is the nature of the beast system. The beast system has to have teeth. It has to be capable of standing on its own, both militarily, politically, and economically. Now, we have seen since the Trump tariffs and since the move in the Middle East, we have seen a garnering of an economic agenda by the European Union. And one of the victims in this, in my opinion, has been Britain. So we've seen the eradication, basically, of the promises of Brexit in terms of the British fishermen now being pushed aside, and authority for the majority of the British waters being given to European Union countries to fish in. Now, just a throwback in this and a tangent a little bit. Keir Starmer, before he was elected, said that his allegiance sat in Davos. His allegiance rested in Davos as opposed to Westminster. In other words, he is a globalist. He is fully aligned with the 2030 agenda. Just again, another tangent, if you don't mind. The 2030 agenda that talks about the likes of decreasing the volume of grams in which people consume, certainly when it comes to meat, certainly when it comes to 15 or C40 cities, and what you consume on a daily basis. They want to drop it down to 16 grams of meat. Now, this is, again, like I said, a tangent, but I was watching Clarkson's farm. You've not that I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, though. I was watching Clarkson's farm, and he was talking about all these abattoirs closing because of the regulations, the government regulations being put on the abattoirs, and how the slaughtering of animals for human consumption occurs. So if you look back to the 1970s, for instance, in the UK, there were 2,500 abattoirs across the UK. Now there's 203. In on the mainland in England, I think there's 49 in general, like smaller ones, but they're expected to close by 2030. And what I'm saying to you, and again, this is a tangent, but just bear with me. Everything is being set, and I want you to understand that I believe that Keir Starmer is certainly a globalist and fully on board with the 2030 agenda, and that has been seen through his policies and his outworking through his, what I can say, historic failure as a prime minister. He is not representing his people. He is not representing the democratic will to take us back into Europe when Britain voted to leave Europe. Certainly in terms of economy, certainly in terms of judiciary. But this goes further. Let's look at some of these videos and show you how this is developing, right? So let me see if this is the right one. So this is talking about the economic responsibilities that now sit upon the British citizen to what I believe is the building of the beast system.
Offers, and there are various ways in which to do that. The EU has several EU defence funds. It has one principal one called the EU Defence Fund, but it has several others as well. And SAFE, the Security Action for Europe, is a new one, which they've only just agreed the legal basis of, and they haven't put it together yet. But this is the one that was being described in the press conference.
So these contributions, would they count towards the 2% of GDP that we pay for defence, or is this a separate thing?
It probably would count towards the 2% of GDP for defence. Now, the problem with that...
What about NATO?
Exactly, yeah. It detracts from what the UK is doing under NATO. It detracts from UK domestic capability development and recruitment and everything else. We're putting so much of our defence budget, we don't have...
So what you heard there is that for this new agreement that Keir Starmer has taken us into, and that has been worked out with Europe, it will require a financial commitment from Britain to facilitate the European Defence Union, or basically the military capability of this rising beast system. As a response to this, as a consequence to this, NATO, certainly it seems financially, will not see um, the same commitment. So this will be the depletion of NATO, or I guess, inconsequential after effect of what NATO will be for the rise of the beast system. And it will, again, also take away the personal British defence system, because our whole foreign policy, and that'll show you that in a minute, will have to align with Europe. Now, I think that this is let me see if I've got the right videos here. Right, let me show you this. This is about the foreign policy.
Also, any UK participation would have to be on EU territory.
After the deal, David wrote that as with its existing defence deal with Norway, Britain will be required to align its foreign, security and defence policies with the EU, effectively being told what its foreign policy will be rather than deciding for itself as a sovereign, independent, nuclear-armed nation.
He said the UK
will have to pay into the much-touted €150 billion defence fund,
but its participation will be based on what benefits EU nations rather than Britain. As with other EU agreements, David said there will be lots of legal requirements, and within them will be ratcheting FX for the EU to wrangle more control of Britain's highly prized defence sector. The UK's increasing investment in EU defence schemes will mean it will be perpetually tied to the EU's direction of travel, he went on.
Well, the legal entanglement would actually go as far as a UK commitment to not diverge from EU foreign policy.
So Britain's foreign policy, the UK's foreign policy, will be set at Brussels. And we are not, according to this new agreement, to deviate, to go off to the side in terms of that foreign policy. Now, that's really interesting, right? So let's see the rise of the beast system, but at the same time, we are seeing this preparation happening for a French ran, Emmanuel Macron heading this out, with Mohammed bin Salman, conference in regards to the two-state solution. Now, on Friday, May 23rd, we saw the preparatory conference both in New York and Paris, but now, and on the 17th of June, we will be seeing this with this call from all these nations, to certainly the Western nations that had previously sort of stood against the arrival of a Palestinian state. Now they're all garnering on. Now they're all being brought on. And this is prophetic. This is amazing that how everything is slotting into to place so quickly. You're seeing Britain, where we chose to leave Europe, now be kind of forced or corralled back into a relationship that is at the detriment to British foreign policy, and actually British defence policy, British home policy, and all of this for the benefit of what I see is this arrival of the beast system. So I don't know what you think in this. Comment below.
But it would mean that the UK would need the EU's endorsement for everything that the UK does anywhere around the world. So any type of foreign policy needs to comply with what the EU says is okay.
And give us an example of something that would be foreign policy. So, for example, what kind of thing would be under the guise of foreign policy?
So I want you to understand this as well, as this is the under the Starmer regime, and I don't know if I can get in trouble with this, but we are seeing a distancing from Washington ourselves, because this isn't just a military, financial, and foreign policy agreement that we're seeing put in place. This is also the restructuring of alliances. So we know that there's been this relationship, this special relationship between the UK and America. But this puts a wedge between that. And well, let's look here.
The author fears the EU is trying to usurp NATO and the UK's close relationships with other countries. In its defence pact, to which the UK will be expected to sign, it demands intelligence sharing with the EU. But Britain has a special agreement with the US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, known as the Five Eyes, which could be threatened.
So again, not only have we seen a geopolitical shifting in the Middle East, right? We have seen the isolation of Iran, which, by the way, I believe is bringing like a freight train coming through in terms of Jeremiah 49 on the horizon. But also, we have seen the Western element of this in terms of what would have been Rome, what would have been the Roman Empire, certainly the Western leg of the Roman Empire, because there was this split around the first millennia. Um, and there was the Eastern leg and the Western leg. And this is the Western leg as far as we know. And this is where I believe there's certainly a spirit behind this to develop the European Union into not just a counterpart, not just a standalone entity against NATO, but also as this kind of untamable beast. So let's watch this.
The EU's defence pact comes after the continent decided it would pursue strategic autonomy, what it calls the ability for act for itself, to speak the language of power, rather than relying on the US, the UK or NATO. It was launched earlier this year. Hidden in its documentation is an admission that member states do not want an EU army, but the Commission says it could force countries into it by using what it calls underused Lisbon Treaty potential. The EU says it wants to share the burden of NATO's obligations rather than duplicate them, suggesting a transition from the alliance's security guarantees from America to what it calls a Europeanised nuclear weapons system under France's direction. The EU moans in the documents that a European nuclear weapon is not even up for discussion. This poses real questions for Britain, the country that has fought countless wars over 1,000 years to stop any one power from dominating the continent. Ben Habib believes Britain is being colonised by the EU.
Colonised is a British economy, it's not the US, it's the European Union. It's the European Union that requires countries...
We see Emmanuel Macron, France here. They want to head this out. They've said as well, the nuclear discussion is not even on the table. In other words, they're not interested in what everybody else has to say. The European Union is going to have nuclear weapons at their disposal. Now, part of this EDU agreement seems to be that Britain's armies, and certainly probably this will involve member states, will put their military capability at the disposal of the European Union. Guys, I don't know what you think in this. I'd like to know your comments underneath. I'd like to know, let me know, do you see what I'm seeing here? Do you see the development of this beast system talked about? And when you see the development of this beast system, what does this mean? Now, obviously, we know prophetically what this means through Revelation 13. But what does this mean for the immediacy of political events right now? That we're seeing a distancing from the UK from Washington. We're seeing Washington garner support with Saudi Arabia. We're seeing Saudi Arabia call for a two-state solution. We're seeing France under the European Union call for a two-state solution. And actually, France can now, under this policy, certainly not France, Brussels now under this policy can dictate British foreign policy. And then we have this upcoming two-state solution conference. Now, Isaiah 13 verse 4 says this: the noise of a multitude in the mountains. Now, mountains in typology in the Bible also can refer to nations, like that of many people. So in this term, this would sit as hermeneutically sustainable in terms of the noise of the multitude in the mountains, like that of many people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms, of nations, there we go, gathered together. The Lord of hosts musters them for battle. And what I'm saying here, I'm not saying that, oh, tomorrow there's going to be an attack or anything like that. I am saying we're seeing the Zechariah 12 moment. Actually, we're seeing the Zechariah 14 moment, because Zechariah 12 talks about the surrounding nations coming against Israel. Now we're seeing the world, and certainly those who have stood back, either abstained or stood against the division of the nation of Israel, certainly in modern context, garner and work to bring this as the key element for everybody to vote on, and not even just vote on, just toe the line. Now, a foreign policy can be dictated from Brussels, and Brussels want a two-state solution. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading into things, but I personally see this as such a major step forward, and I believe that we are on a knife edge in which, God could restrain, and God could use the church to restrain a little bit longer, or God could just let all of this unfold. And, I don't know, I'm not a date setter or anything like that. I'm not going to talk about dates in that way, but I am saying that certainly we are witnessing prophecy come to bear. Europe has said, and they've talked about this in those in some of the videos that I was watching today, about being this separate autonomous entity that is militarily capable, that is nuclear power, that is economically distanced and set aside, not dependent, but standing on their own. To me, that's what we see in Revelation 13. The beast that comes out of the sea, specifically in this term, the Mediterranean, we're seeing the beast arise. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know, if you think I'm off my rocker, or if you think that this new deal that Britain has entered into with Europe is a step forward to the beast system. And do you think that the fact that nuclear capability or nuclear power for the Union, not for individual countries, but for the European Union, shows that this beast has teeth? So, guys, let me know. And don't forget, this week we have the Prophetic Outlook longer program is live tomorrow, Tuesday. That is Tuesday the 27th. Wednesday the 28th. We will be slightly later tomorrow because we're doing a check for a round table. So I'll be maybe about 7:30, something like that. But the times will all be up. Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, we have Lee Brainerd back on, a good friend of mine, good friend of the shows. And then on Friday, we will be on Pastor Kurt's channel, and it will be JB Hicks and L.A. Marzulli, I think Pete Garcia and others, and myself, and we will be discussing a whole load of things in a round table, and that will be very early my time. It's like 1 a.m. my time, but it's whatever time that is. I think it's 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm not sure. But guys, keep a lookout for it. I call you the head and not the tail, above and not beneath, kings, queens, and priests in Jesus' mighty name. And remember, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. We live in prophetic times. Amen. Guys, God bless.